So here's my graphs that I have here at the console. Obviously they're Ethernet together. So what that means is if I put a dot or a waypoint, if I mark a waypoint on these graphs, that waypoint is going to be held on reserve up there at the bow as well. So once I find the brush pile, I find whatever structure I'm looking for, when I get to the trolling motor and I'm ready to fish, when I pull up my map, this same exact dot is going to be on the grass up front. But these are Garmin 12-inch screens. These are 126 SVs, both of them here at the console. Great units, and I've been really pleased with them. Very, very detailed 3D imaging on these units. This is my 3D imaging on this side. The way I like to run my graphs when I'm looking for brush piles, I have one graph totally dedicated to nothing but mapping. To me, mapping is almost as important as the actual 3D image itself. If you don't, because where I'm looking for brush at, I'm not just looking for brush out here in random places out here on the lake. I'm going to look for brush on creek turns. I'm going to look for brush on depressions. I'm going to look for brush on high spots. I'm going to look for them around points. I'm going to look for them around humps. There's very specific areas that I'm looking for brush on. So the most important thing, or the first thing that I'm going to look at, is going to be the mapping, because the mapping is going to tell me where those creek turns are. The mapping is going to tell me where there's a point that maybe someone else missed that you can't see with the visual eye. Some of the stuff that I'm actually going to be looking for on this graph, I can visually see it, but a lot of it is not going to be what I visually can see. And without this map, I don't know that there's a high spot out in the mouth of this creek. I don't know that this bank is a little deeper. I don't know that there's a hump out in the middle of the river channel that's stopping a little bit of current. It's creating a current break out in the middle of the river. So mapping is I'm going to say just as important, or maybe more important, as the actual fish locating part of this system is altogether. So that's why I have a graph totally dedicated to nothing but mapping here. You can see I also can color shade. Now I don't have it color shaded for what I'm doing today, but I can color shade out the depths on my graph as well. So if I want everything in red from 15 foot and shallower, I can do that. Or if I want everything in green from 30 foot and deeper, I can go in here in my settings and I can change those shades to highlight those areas, so I'm not guessing where 20 foot is. Once I've pretty much decided in a day of fishing that the fish are going to be between 20 and 25 foot, I can go in here in my settings, change that to 20 and 25 foot, and highlight every area on the lake that's between 20 and 25 foot, green, yellow, red, whatever the case may be. So very, very powerful tool is your mapping feature on your units. It doesn't even matter if it's Garmin or whatever it is, whatever your manufacturer is, but specifically for finding brush piles and finding fish, mapping is almost just as important, or maybe more important. So this graph here on the right side, I have it completely dedicated to side imaging and down imaging, my 3D sonar. There's times where I'll actually I'll have my 2D sonar as well, because I like to compare. Personally, you know, there's times where I feel like 3D will pick up things that 2D sonar or traditional sonar won't pick up. And there's also times where I feel like traditional sonar will pick up certain images, or I can decipher what a bottom texture is, or if it's fish or brush. Sometimes I feel like I can decipher it better on 2D. So there's times where I'll have all three of those going on this particular graph. But for right now, I just want to show you what brush piles look like on your unit with 3D imaging, using the side imaging and the down imaging. I'm able to look off to the side. You can see there's actually some markers here on the graph, and you can see how far I'm looking out to the left and right side. I'm looking 65 foot to my left. I'm looking 65 foot to my right as I'm idling. And so I have the ability to look under these docks as I'm idling, which is where I would presume the fish would be, since we're out here looking around during the pre-spawn of the year. They don't all just rush to the bank all at the same time. Fish they stop on these little points. And a lot of times they'll stop on brush around docks before they actually even use the docks. So especially spotted bass specifically, they will stop on brush a little bit deeper in front of the docks before they actually start using the docks. The reason being is during the springtime of the year, you can get a lot of different cold fronts and weather situations, and that water in 15, 20 foot of water deeper out in front of the docks is a lot more stable than them getting up and suspending under the docks. So if you got any kind of cold front, turbulent water, or just a lot of fronts that's kind of going through your area, even though they may be around the docks, they may not be on them. And if you can find brush around the docks, that's likely where you're going to find fish. So what I'm doing right now is I'm idling around in this pocket and looking for brush out in front and around the sides of these docks, using my 3D sonar, my side imaging and down imaging around these pockets, little canals, around points, looking for the right structure. If you look on the graph here now, this is a good example. We'll pull that up. You see, this is actually a wad of bait on my 3D imaging right here, and that's important too, because there's basically only a few things that fish need to live around. They need habitat or cover, which is basically what we're looking for, brush piles, and they need food. They need food, and we've got some food in this pocket that we're idling around in here right there. If you zoom in on it, you can see that's just a wad of bait that's just kind of just sashaying through this pocket right here. So we've got at least one of the elements we need. We need food, we need habitat, brush, cover, so that they feel protected, and we also, I like to have, especially in the context of spotted bass, I like to have access to deep water. Even though spotted bass are not always deep, they almost always want to be near deeper water. All right, so having that access, this is a pocket that's right off the main lake. So if I find a brush pile in and around any of these docks, and when I say deeper brush pile, anything I'm going to say on this particular body of water, 15 foot or deeper, that's a high percentage area to find a brush pile. So keep on idling around until I find that brush. Looking on my side imaging, I'm actually seeing a little bit right now. Now I can't actually idle over this right now. I can't idle over it. I'm going to pause the screen right here. Just hit the pause button. You see that little bit of disturbance right there. Now that may not actually be a brush pile, but that looks more like a rock pile or something like that right there. This to our left, I can put the cursor on it, tell exactly how far to my left it was. So it was 39.1 feet to my left, and it was just on the outside of that dock. You can see there's like a clean spot here, and that little bit of shadow that is cascading right there, that is the brush pile, rock pile, some type of structure that's throwing a shadow off to my left. That's not really what I'm looking for in this instance. What I'm really looking for is that big blossoming brush pile. So I will make note of that. What I'll do is put my cursor right there where that is, and I'll hit mark, and it's going to put a waypoint exactly where that is. And I can come over here to my mapping. You'll notice that this map actually has the dock that I was looking on. You see these gray blotches right here, that's actually the dock. Garmin goes as far as to show you where the docks are in the cove, and you can see that brush pile is right beside that dock. So when I get up to the trolling motor, I can jump up, go right beside that dock, and know exactly where to cast to get to that brush pile. So this is a good example where you can compare the 2D imaging to 3D imaging on a brush pile that's out here on the tip of an island. If you look here on my mapping, I'll zoom in so you can see when the green spot. What I did is I highlighted everything that's 15 foot and shallower, and this is this little green spot right here. This is an island, a little underwater island, and I'm just idling around the tip of it. You see, this is the point of this little underwater island. If I zoom out, you can see it's out here in the middle of the lake, and there's just a little hot spot right there. So I got out here on the tip of it, and I just started idling, and I found a brush pile, a likely place for a fish to be. And I'm going to show you what it looks like on the 2D traditional sonar first. You see, this is what it's going to look like on a 2D traditional sonar. If you're not careful, to some people that may look like a wad of bait. That could look like a wad of bait with fish over the top of it. That actually may have been some fish right here. That's probably a fish right there, but that can be a little difficult to decipher what it really is. Now let's go to 3D imaging right here. You can see a much clearer what that really is. I'm going to pause it. You can see the branches sticking out. You can see that looks a lot more like a brush pile. That's why I like to compare them, and I like to run traditional and 3D at the same time, because now there's other times where I look at the same image, and to me Maybe the on 2D sonar, I can tell what it is a little bit better, especially when you're talking about fish. So that's a perfect example. That's just a cane, what we call cane piles here in South Carolina. That's a cane pile. You can tell it very distinctively because you can see the branches going out. That's what cane does. When they sink it, they fold up, and as soon as it hits the bottom, they kind of broaden out, and that's what makes it good structure for you to catch fish on. But that's just a good example. I'll show you the two side by side here on, well, actually I may not be able to, but you can see that's a much easier to decipher on 3D imaging than it is on 2D, which is this one right here. 2D, kind of a little fuzzy, can't really tell what it is. You can say, oh, maybe that's bait, maybe that's this, maybe that's that. But when you come over to 3D imaging, it's very clear, very apparent that that is a brush pile. That's not fish, that's not bait. You can see the image much brighter, you see it much easier. All right, so that's a very good example. You see that right there? I'm gonna pause it. You see right here on 2D imaging, there's the brush right there. You can see that's another cane pile right there. It's so detailed that I can almost tell you whether it's a hardwood brush pile or if it's a cane pile like what we're looking at right now. That's very distinctively a bamboo, what we call it cane, or bamboo pile. We sink a lot of bamboo here in South Carolina because I'm really not sure why. I just know that's what people sink a lot here in South Carolina. I think it branches out and is a good attractant for algae, which attracts the bait fish, which attracts the bass. But you can see the way just the way it's structured in the water, you can tell what type of brush, what kind of wood structure you're actually looking for. Same thing here. You see I'm on another hot spot out in the middle of the lake. 15 foot, I'm islanding around it. I got around in this brush pile is in about 26 foot of water right here. And what I'll do is once I see a brush pile like that, you can see what it looks like on 2D sonar too. You can see the two right there together. 2D sonar, dude, I don't know what that looks like. I don't know what that looks like. A fish maybe over the top of it. It looks a little weird, but when I go to 3D imaging right here, it's very clear, very apparent, without a shadow of a doubt, what that is. So that's why I like to compare the two. When I'm looking at fish, sometimes I do actually I exclusively use it on the bow when I'm actually fishing for fish. But when I'm looking for fish, when I'm looking for structure, I do rely on this more, even though I like to compare the two images. So here's a second screen preset that I like to use when I'm idling. As I mentioned, I do like to still compare my images on 2D sonar. So occasionally this is another preset, especially for you guys if you only have one graph on your console. I know you see me here with two graphs, but I don't want you to go out and spend, you know, another $9,000 on graphs just so making you think that you're going to be able to do this better. You can do this with one graph, and actually last year on my boat I did have one graph, and this is the screen preset that I use when I'm using only one graph. You can put the mapping, you can do a three-way split screen on this guy. Use the mapping, 2D sonar, and down imaging is the particular preset that I like to look at because I think that's the most important if you only have one graph. Obviously the mapping, because we need to know what we're doing, where we're idling, how deep the water is there a hump, is there a pump, is there a point. We need to know what structure we're actually fishing around because we're trying to find structure around where fish would be anyway. That's the whole point. That dumbs this down and makes it easier to find our fish. So using a split screen of mapping, traditional 2D sonar, so I can compare that to the 3D imaging and the 3D sonar, what I have here, that is another preset that I like to use, especially if you only have one unit to fish with. Here's a good example. We looked at down imaging, so you can see what brush looks like on that. Side imaging can be a little bit more tricky to decipher what you're looking at because basically on side imaging, this is the way it was explained to me and this is the way that I can understand it the best. If you can imagine just shining a flashlight off to the side, anything that's standing up in front of the flashlight is going to throw a shadow. So when I'm idling looking for things, structure, brush, rocks, laydowns, logs, stuff off to the side with my side view, what I'm looking for is any kind of shadow. Anytime I see any shadow or a little rough spot, if I see something that's dark, I know it's going to be a shadow. If I see something that's light or the images start to shine or get brighter, I know it's going to be like a high spot. I can find high spots off to the side as well, just like I can find structure. But right here, what I've got, I'm going to highlight this. You can see there's a lot of little shadows right here. What that is brush. That's brush that somebody's planted out in front of this dock that's right here in front of the boat. You see those little, it's like little Christmas trees all out in front of here, throwing shadows. And you can't really tell that it's a Christmas tree on side imaging, but the moment that you idle over the top of it with down imaging, you can see it very clearly that it is a Christmas tree that someone sank in front of this dock right here. But on side imaging, all you're going to do is cast a shadow, and that's all I'm looking for, because you see slick bottom, slick bottom, slick bottom, and then you start seeing these little shadows right here, and that is brush, my friends. Once I've marked it on my side imaging, to actually waypoint where it is, I don't have to get on top of it. All I have to do is take my finger, put my cursor right on top of where that shadow is, or that dark spot, and I'll hit mark. I have a waypoint where that is, and you'll see once this clears out, check it out. That waypoint is 36.3 foot away from where the boat is setting right now, or where my heading sensor is setting right now, which my heading sensor is at the bow of this boat. So that's how you mark and find brush piles. Now the work begins. We'll have to do that in a separate video. Now you've got to figure out, once you've located the brush, you've seen the fish setting in the brush, now you got to go in your tackle locker, take out a rod, tie on the right bait, and learn how to catch that fish. But it all starts right here at the console, finding the structure, figuring out where it is, how deep it is, and where the fish are on your particular body of water. That's how you find brush pile on your home body of water, and I promise you, you can catch a lot of fish doing it. That's it, let's go home!